Jane Haining first heard about the opportunity at the Scottish Mission in Budapest through an advertisement in Life and Work. She had already heard missionaries reporting on their work in her own church. And when she heard that, she thought that this would be her life's calling as well. So when she saw the ad in Life and Work, she applied. At first, they made it clear that they preferred only for married women to take these missionary jobs. They didn't want to send someone who was single unless they were male. But eventually she was able to persuade them, and she was sent on behalf of the Church of Scotland to the Scottish Mission to the Jews in Budapest.
Itt mesés volt. Otthon éreztük magunkat, semmiféle zavaró körülmény soha nem fordult elő. A tanárok teljesen egyformán viselkedtek velünk szembe, mint a reformátusokkal szemben, mert főleg reformátusok jártak ide.
The school had already been built. It was built in 1910, and this was a school where Jewish girls and Christian girls were studying together, and some of them were living here. And that was her role, was to take care of those who were living here, in a way being their mother. She wasn't teaching them, she wasn't the headmistress of the school, but she was taking care of the girls who were here. I imagine her days would have been spent making sure that people were up on time and also in bed on time, making sure that they were ready for their classes the next day or that they were doing their homework, but also she dealt with any bickering that was occurring between them, and if someone wasn't feeling well, it was to her that they went crying. And we do have accounts of those, that one elderly woman remembered that in her childhood, when she was ill, she was given the privilege of staying in Jane's own room for the night so that Jane could keep a better eye on her.
Annak alapján én nem mehettem az általános iskolából középiskolai gimnáziumba. És a gimnázium helyett kerültem én ide, akkor már híre volt a skót polgárinak, hogy mennyire szívesen fogadja az üldözött zsidó gyerekeket.
First, there were laws that started to be more and more strict about Jews and even what opportunities would be available for them. The university applications would be limited. For example, she remembers that there was one girl who wanted to become a teacher, and Jane had to inform her that because she was Jewish, she would not be able to apply for that university course of study, which was in a way particularly tragic because this own girl did not know that that was her background. So that was how she discovered that she was Jewish. So you could see that various restrictions were being placed increasingly on the Jews who lived in Hungary, and there was an awareness at the Scottish Mission of that.
Minden osztályba csak egy bizonyos számban, nagyon kis létszámba vettek fel zsidó lányokat a gimnáziumba, a többiek a gimnáziumból kiszorultak. Ez volt a kormánynak a célja, hogy minél kevesebb értelmiségi legyen zsidóból.
There would have always been a concern on Jane's mind when the imminent threat to the safety and life of the girls might occur. That must have been one of the reasons that she came back, because in fact, the first time she was urged not to remain here was when she was on leave in Scotland, and her answer to the Church of Scotland was that if the children need me in the days of sunshine, how much more will they need me in the days of darkness? She was aware of that darkness when she came and multiple times refused to return. So I think that, first of all, that instruction from the Church of Scotland and her refusal to return those indicate how things were getting darker here and how she anticipated that to get even worse. When Jane was eventually arrested, one of the charges that was filed against her was that she had wept when sewing yellow stars on the uniforms of the girls. One thing we can just pause and observe how brutal a regime would be that considers it a crime simply to cry when sewing on yellow stars. I remember when I visited the Anne Frank Museum in the Netherlands, that Anne Frank in her own journal commented on how she hated wearing that gaudy yellow star. So to think about the prejudice, the self-consciousness that the girls might feel, and definitely Jane felt for them.
Felejthetetlen megrázó élmény, ami egy életen át elkísér maga, az, ami akkor Magyarországon történt, és amik az elhurcolások, és a Dunába lövések, és minden, ami akkor történt, és ez egy mencsvár volt, ameddig működhetett. Egy biztonságos otthont jelentett.
As far as we know, both anecdotal and documented evidence are that it was precisely her always prioritizing the girls' needs that got her into trouble, so to speak. Because when they came to arrest her, it was not a raid on the school overall. There was no one else taken away on that day. It was only Jane Haining that they came for. But prior to that, there had been an occasion where she had gone into the kitchen and discovered one of the staff of the school with her boyfriend, who happened to be a member of the Arrow Cross Party. And this person had been feeding her boyfriend from the supplies that were intended for the girls. So Jane Haining scolded them both, and this young man must have, we believe, borne a grudge against her, because it was after that the Hungarian Nazis came to arrest her. She said to the girls that she would be back in time for lunch. Whether she believed that or whether she was trying to protect them from panic, I think we can only speculate. She would have known that things were harsh, but whether she knew that she would never return, I honestly don't know. But they came for her, they took her away, and it's true that she never returned here.
Nagyon megrázó élmény volt, mert valamennyien szerettük és tiszteltük az itt tanítókat, tanárainkat. Nagyon, ma is könnybe lábad a szemem.
One of the things I like to look to in Jane is how she herself lived out her faith. And what I see is that for her, to care for others, even those who might be labeled as different, was a basic instinctive expression of how she lived out her Christian faith. And I believe that's an example for us today, and has particular relevance when some people are using Christian faith as a justification for nationalism and excluding others, whereas for her, it was just the opposite.
És hihetetlen, hogy a mai politikai helyzet sok országban olyan, hogy a jobb oldal jut érvényre, és reszketve gondolnak azok, akik az előzőt túlélték, hogy mit hoz a holnap.
There are a couple of reasons it's important to remember Jane's sacrifice. One reason is that in times of difficulty, when we see people being persecuted, victimized in a variety of ways, it's good for us to look at the example of those who did stand up. Because we might be afraid, we might think we couldn't do anything, but when we see people like Jane Haining who stood up and even faced dire consequences, it can present an example for us ourselves to follow, that yes, this can be done, and perhaps it's time for us to do it. It's also good because in addition to setting an example, it's also a part of the story that we see in a brutal regime how anyone who resisted would ultimately be targeted. So if anyone ever thinks that they're not the initial target group and therefore they are safe, then they simply don't know enough of how history has taught us. So we can see that a threat to any group of people is a threat to us all, and that any of us can and should stand up.
Ritka érzés az emberbe, ahol szeretetet kapott, akkor